A group of lawyers filed a lawsuit. They challenged former President Trump. They accused him of illegally freezing USAID funds. This wasn't just about money, it was about the rule of law. It was about America's place in the world. The lawsuit, filed in federal court, sent shockwaves. It argued that Trump overstepped his authority. He froze funds without congressional approval. He ignored legal norms. He put lives at risk. The lawsuit demanded immediate action. It called for the release of the frozen funds. It sought to hold Trump accountable. But Trump, never one to back down, had other plans. Trump refused to comply. He ignored the court order to release the funds. He claimed it didn't apply to him. He saw himself as above the law. This was Trump at his most defiant. His actions sent a chilling message. He was willing to disregard the judiciary. He was willing to put his own interests above the country's. The man who swore to uphold the Constitution was now trampling on it. The world watched in disbelief. America, once a beacon of democracy, was now a cautionary tale. Trump's brazen power grab had plunged the nation into uncharted territory. Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO, added fuel to the fire. He launched a scathing attack on USAID. He called it a criminal organization. He accused it of corruption and mismanagement. Musk's motives were unclear. Some speculated it stemmed from USAID's opposition to apartheid in South Africa, his birthplace. Others saw it as a publicity stunt, a way to align himself with Trump's base. Whatever his reasons, Musk's words had consequences. They lent credibility to Trump's actions. They undermined public trust in a vital institution. They emboldened those who sought to dismantle America's global leadership. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, saw an opportunity. He declared himself interim USAID administrator. It was a bold move, one that raised eyebrows across Washington. Rubio then appointed Pete Morocco, a controversial figure, to lead the agency. Morocco had been accused of involvement in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. His appointment reeked of cronyism. Rubio's actions were a blatant power grab. He was installing loyalists in key positions. He was consolidating control over foreign aid. He was transforming USAID into a tool of his own political ambitions. Section 5, Silent Suffering, the human cost of frozen aid. While politicians squabbled, people suffered. The funding freeze had a devastating impact. Essential medicines were delayed, millions faced hunger and disease, lives hung in the balance. In developing nations, the consequences were dire. HIV services were disrupted. Malaria prevention programs were halted. Tuberculosis treatment centers ran out of supplies. The most vulnerable paid the price. Human rights advocates sounded the alarm. They warned of a looming catastrophe. They pleaded for the release of the funds, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Section 6. A legacy undermined, from Kennedy's vision to Trump's chaos. USAID was more than just an agency. It was a beacon of hope and a testament to the American spirit of generosity and compassion. Established in 1961, it aimed to promote long-term economic development and humanitarian assistance around the globe. The agency's mission was to extend a helping hand to those in need, regardless of their nationality or political affiliation. It was a symbol of American values. The stars and stripes on the aid packages were not just a mark of origin, but a promise of support and solidarity. USAID's efforts were a reflection of the belief that America stood for more than just power. It stood for principles and ideals that transcended borders. It represented the belief that we have a moral obligation to help those less fortunate. Whether it was providing disaster relief, supporting healthcare initiatives, or fostering educational opportunities, USAID's work was driven by a deep-seated conviction that every human being deserved a chance at a better life. President Kennedy, who created USAID, understood this. He envisioned a world where American aid could be a force for good, a tool to build bridges and foster understanding. His vision was rooted in the idea that by helping others, we also uplifted ourselves. He saw it as a vital tool in the fight against communism. During the Cold War, foreign aid was not just about charity. It was a strategic move to win hearts and minds. By promoting development and stability, Kennedy believed we could counter the spread of communism and create a more secure world. He believed that by promoting development, we could create a more stable and prosperous world. The idea was simple yet profound. Economic growth and social progress in developing nations would lead to a more peaceful global community. This vision guided USAID's efforts for decades. Trump's actions were a betrayal of this legacy. His administration's policies marked a stark departure from the principles that had guided USAID since its inception. By slashing budgets and undermining the agency's mission, Trump turned his back on the values that had made America a beacon of hope for so many. He turned his back on decades of bipartisan support for foreign aid. For years, leaders from both parties had recognized the importance of international assistance, not just as a moral imperative, but as a strategic necessity. Trump's approach disregarded this consensus, putting short-term political gains over long-term global stability. He abandoned America's role as a global leader. By withdrawing from international commitments and neglecting our allies, Trump's policies left a void on the world stage. The consequences of this retreat were felt far and wide as the world looked on, wondering what had become of the America that once stood for hope, progress, and unity. Section 7. The Rule of Law, a Nation Adrift. The USAID saga was not an isolated incident. It was emblematic of a broader crisis that had been brewing for years. The agency, once a beacon of American goodwill and international cooperation, had become a symbol of the internal strife and dysfunction that plagued the nation. Mismanagement, corruption, and political interference had eroded its effectiveness, leaving it a shadow of its former self. It was part of a larger pattern of Trump's disregard for the rule of law. His administration's actions were not just isolated missteps, but a deliberate strategy to undermine the checks and balances that are the bedrock of American democracy. From the travel ban to the family separation policy, each move was calculated to test the limits of executive power. He had attacked the judiciary, the media, and anyone who dared to question him. Judges who ruled against him were labeled as so-called judges, and the press was branded as the enemy of the people. These attacks were not just rhetorical, they had real consequences, eroding public trust in these vital institutions. His presidency had tested the very foundations of American democracy. The impeachment trials, the constant turnover in his administration, and the relentless attacks on democratic norms left the nation in a state of perpetual crisis. The very idea of truth became contested, with alternative facts muddying the waters of public discourse. He had chipped away at norms and institutions. The Department of Justice, once seen as an independent arbiter of the law, was increasingly viewed as a tool of the president's will. Whistleblowers were silenced, and oversight mechanisms were weakened, leaving the government less accountable to the people it served. He had sown division and distrust. The rhetoric of us versus them permeated every aspect of public life, turning neighbors into adversaries and communities into battlegrounds. Social media amplified these divisions, creating echo chambers where misinformation thrived and consensus became impossible. He had left the country deeply polarized. The divide between urban and rural, liberal and conservative, had never been more pronounced. Electoral maps painted a stark picture of a nation split in two, with each side viewing the other not just as opponents, but as existential threats to their way of life. The question now was, could America recover? Could the nation find a way to bridge these divides and heal the wounds that had been inflicted? The challenges were immense, but so too was the resilience of the American spirit. History had shown that the country could overcome great adversity, but it would require a collective effort and a recommitment to the principles that had once united it. Could it heal the wounds inflicted by Trump? The path to recovery would be long and arduous, requiring not just political change but a cultural shift. Communities would need to come together, finding common ground and rebuilding trust. Leaders at all levels would have to rise to the occasion, putting the nation's interests above partisan politics. Could it restore faith in its institutions? Restoring faith would mean holding those who had undermined these institutions accountable, while also reforming them to better serve the public. It would mean a renewed commitment to transparency, integrity, and the rule of law. Only then could the nation hope to move forward. The answer was far from certain. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but it was also filled with opportunities for renewal and growth. The future of the nation depended on the choices its people would make in the coming years. Would they rise to the occasion, or would they allow the divisions to deepen? Only time would tell. Section 8. Echoes of the Past. Trump's Authoritarian Playbook. Trump's actions had a familiar ring to them. They echoed the tactics of authoritarian leaders throughout history. He had demonized his opponents. He had spread disinformation. He had attempted to undermine free and fair elections. His assault on USAID was just the latest example. He was dismantling a key instrument of American power. He was consolidating his own authority. He was moving the country closer to autocracy. The world was watching. America's allies were concerned. Its enemies were emboldened. The future of democracy hung in the balance. Section 9. A fragile future. Can American democracy survive? This is a question that has been on the minds of many Americans, especially in recent years. The challenges facing the nation are numerous and complex, and the answers are far from simple. The legal battle over USAID funding was more than just a legal dispute. It represented a deeper conflict about the values and principles that define the United States. The courtroom became a battleground where different visions of America's future clashed. It was a battle for the soul of America. The stakes were incredibly high, and the outcome would have far-reaching implications for the nation's identity and its role in the world. The tension was palpable, and the nation watched with bated breath. It was a test of whether the country's institutions could withstand the assault from within. The outcome was uncertain. Would the judiciary remain impartial and uphold the rule of law, or would it succumb to political pressures? The integrity of the legal system was on the line. The courts would have their say, Congress might intervene, lawmakers debated fiercely, each side presenting their arguments with passion and conviction. The legislative branch had the power to shape the outcome, but it was divided and polarized. But ultimately, it was up to the American people to decide what kind of country they wanted to live in. Through their votes and civic engagement, citizens had the power to influence the direction of the nation. Town hall meetings and community discussions became crucial forums for debate and decision-making. The future of American democracy was fragile. The signs of strain were evident, and the cracks in the system were becoming more pronounced. Protecting the rights and freedoms that define the nation required constant vigilance and effort. It would take vigilance and courage to defend it. Citizens needed to stay informed, participate in the democratic process, and hold their leaders accountable. Education and awareness were key to fostering a resilient and vibrant democracy. The stakes had never been higher. The decisions made today would shape the future for generations to come. The responsibility was immense, but so was the potential for positive change. The American people stood at a crossroads with the power to determine the path forward.